Not Board of Education. Not Board of Education. Cobb County celebration. Tell the kids no hesitation. Not Board of Education.
Welcome back to Not Board of Education. I am Laura Judge.
I am Andrew Cole. Thank you for joining us again on the third episode of this podcast that we've put together to help everyone, but certainly members of the Cobb County community, stay up to date with developments, updates, proposals, votes, anything that has to do with the actions of the Board of Education and the experience and benefits for the students of our community.
Yes, and just this past Thursday, March 20th, we had a board meeting. So this will discuss a lot of things that we saw at that board meeting, the good and the bad. So Andrew, do you want to start with pretty much the first thing that we saw at the board meeting?
Yes. So and just to recap too, remember, usually, mostly every time there is a board meeting day, they'll have that afternoon session where they dig into specifics of what's on the agenda and have more lengthy discussions. And then they'll agree after talking through everything about what's going to be heard again and voted on in the second session that evening. So for that afternoon block, they covered a number of financial updates. And just in general, a lot of it was, and I don't mean any of this to belittle it, but some of the requests were just approvals for architecture firms to draft up designs for an addition to a school or an improvement to an awning or a facility trait. So nothing too major, but always want to highlight the fact that you want to keep an eye on which schools are getting what, where they are, and what the needs of that community are, and if that is the most pressing need for that school. So to that end, I highly recommend getting involved with your local PTA, because they are going to have their finger on the pulse of the school's needs and be relaying with leadership at that school. I definitely know that's how it is for my experience with my daughter's school. And it's a great way to learn about what's needed. And sometimes they'll cover that with a fundraiser over on the side. Sometimes they can work with the local government entities to get SPLOST funding to fund one of those improvements. So it's really interesting to see the needs and how they can be satisfied with a number of different avenues. So it was a good chance to hear what's been allocated and why and where. But then the last part I wanted to say on that was also to be recommend people to be a little analytical and what is the most pressing need, and we're able to make time and investments for these things. Where did that fall in the giant list of to-dos that I know the county and the board has, and there's no way to solve them all and fund them all and do them all at the same time. But it's always good to be a little constructively critical about what ended up on the docket and what got funded every month.
Yes, and I wanted to also add who gets those contracts as well. As something that I do in my personal capacity is filling out requests for proposals, is how many people put a bid in, who do they look at and everything. And so looking at those different construction or architectural companies that the school board does pick and choose to fill these things. And then to also add on to what Andrew said about getting involved in your local PTA. Also, the schools have a principal advisory council as well. And you can get on that as well, because the principal is trying to get all those things done for his or her school as well. And you can also see from that end versus they're both volunteer ends, but the PTA is parent and teacher focused, working with the principal, and the principal advisory committee meets with the principal to see where those gaps are, and to, talk with your local school board member as well.
What were, speaking of those committees, what was the the structure previously? I know those were developed as a new method of bridging the parent school leadership / board gap, and you want all those different groups to be able to interact and communicate between levels. But years ago, there were different groups around. I'm trying to remember. Do you?
Yeah, so there were also board advisory councils as well.
Yeah.
And that was something that I have asked for, so that, more people that are looking at the bigger picture as the district goes, can advise the board members. You don't really hold any power per se, but you do bring back more so what's happening in the community, because, board members are over 3 high schools, and probably 3 or 4 middle schools, and down to 5 or 6 elementary schools. So that's a lot of schools for them to look over, and so those councils can advise the board members. We do have a strategic waiver saying that we don't need to have board advisory councils, though.
That's right. Okay. I knew there had been something done in the past, and then I'd heard the cynical people said that when people got too noisy or critical, there was a methodology change, because what are we to do if people are getting together and asking for improvements and citing data-backed evidence? So I say all that to say I like the idea of having tiered methods of gathering information from the community. I don't think that is being done in a effective way right now, and coming out once a month or once a quarter or once a year to ask for something and getting only 2 minutes is a real pie in the sky method to hope to get attention from your school leadership, your board member, the board at large, the superintendent. So in the future, I look forward to additional methods of like gleaning information requests from the community and having it go up that ladder in a concentrated way, because I just don't see that being fully bridged right now.
Yeah. And I mean, that's why we come here, because a lot of people don't know those things or historically what has happened before. And it takes a lot of research. It takes a lot of time watching board meetings. And so we are trying to condense it for the average listener, people that want to know more about how to advocate, and even if they don't want to advocate, what is happening on a district level. Yeah,
I agree. So we talked about some of the financial proposals, approvals. A lot of it was construction and architecture based. Nothing too novel or enormous. Nothing like a basketball arena, say. But what was the next thing you wanted to go over? He had mentioned there was one book that was being added to the ever-growing list.
Yes. So our superintendent did mention that during the working session, so that's the business part of the meeting, he mentioned that there was another book removal. It was Dead End by Jason Myers. And so my only thing with our removal of books from our schools is the process. 1, how did it even get into the school? And now 2, how he's taking it out. Who is making those decisions? What is the reason for those decisions? We just keep hearing sexual content. What is that content that is causing these books to be removed? And again, why is that decision being taken away from the parents and placed with the superintendent?
Yeah, it obviously mattered enough to do something about it. So what was it that mattered enough? And is this a secret? You're doing it anyway. So telling us why you're doing it, no one can stop you. And I think they all know and like that. But I share that concern too. What I've been bothered by all along is just the back room dealing or like the black box of action, and then they come out with a decision, whether it's a book or policy or anything. And I would just love to know more about the why and the who and the how. And I don't know why that is being so demanding. I just think that's reasonable. If you're altering materials or removing them, just tell people why and what it was.
Yeah. And then it comes down to statements like it's a difference of good and evil, or even within the school groups online, people accusing others of pedophilia or trafficking kids. And I've always said, if those are serious accusations, and if you feel that people are exposing children to things that are illegal, then you should get police involved. And the biggest thing is that I have seen is that police have not been involved. It is just forcefully people wanting to get their way. And again, I'm not asking for these books to be returned to our school libraries. I'm just asking for transparency in the process.
Yeah, I completely agree. And one thing you just mentioned there reminded me, we've got this that stark dichotomy. It's about good and evil, and some of these concerns really, I would say, I was going to say toe the line, but I don't even know if they near the line sometimes with some of the books that have been reviewed and were just so concerning. And so that's where I want to have the conversation, not just for the sake of analyzing a book, but also to spur, hopefully, a community-wide shared understanding that, hey, I'm from that community. I am a member of a certain belief system or ethnic background. And because of that, when you removed this book, it didn't tell me why. That made me feel like you were bothered by people like me. And like people are feeling that when these materials are being removed. And I don't know if that concern is being properly understood at the higher levels. And so, sure, explain why you removed the book, but then I would like you to be prepared to listen to others who were okay with it and why, or why they were hurt by that. And maybe we could all understand more where everyone's coming from. That would be a really welcome change.
Yeah. And I know even within the community, people like to split hairs about the language, whether you call it a book ban or a book removal, or like where you have access to the books. And I know on our even number episodes, we have a tendency to talk about what's happening at the Capitol level, but currently there are bills moving through our state legislature to remove books from the public library as well, and holding librarians accountable for having certain books in their library as well. So it's not just anymore in the individual schools, it's going out to the public libraries as well. And so I know I spoke about it before, that slippery slope of how far are we going to take this, and where does our freedom and our freedom to read what is written.
Yeah, well, and by having certain materials around, I welcome the discussion from all angles, but by having things around that you don't like or agree with, or may even offend you to a certain, I don't want to go too far, but I don't know if you're born with a right to be protected from anyone bothering you for the rest of your life, especially while you're learning about the rest of the world while you're growing up and you're in school. I think there is a valuable part of the experience that I had where I was being presented with the merits of Buddhism in one of my social studies courses when I was in 7th grade. I did not come across that at home and in my upbringing. And I am appreciative to this day of being exposed to that and understanding more about what other groups do or believe or practice. And that is connected to this book discussion. And and to that end, I really would like to see more of a conversation being had and explanations provided.
Yeah. So, and I think that was the biggest thing with the morning meeting. We had finances, we had construction approvals. The superintendent mentioned this book removal, but surprisingly, our two Democratic board members got something on the agenda as well, which normally doesn't always happen. So board member Davis is now the liaison for our F&T committee, and she talked about F&T, which is facilities and technology. It's another committee that each board member gets 2 appointees, also another volunteer position, and it goes over those construction contracts that we talked about. There is every couple of years you vote on SPLOST, EdSPLOST, special purpose local option sales tax.
I go through it in that paced way every time I do it too.
Making sure I got every letter. And so normally they call it the penny tax. And there's a notebook that the district makes up of with input from different principals of what projects schools need within the district. And so those appointees go over those projects and they have meetings. And there was a meeting, I want to say last week, I forget the exact date, but they voted in a new board. And so we have a new board chair. His name is Michael McNally, a board vice chair, Leslie Litt, and a secretary, which is Dr. Christian Johnson. I believe those are all new folks in those positions. And their next meeting is May 20th. Those meetings are open to the public. So if you want to know what construction things are coming up, if your school's on a list or anything, I highly recommend you going to those meetings or talking to the appointees.
Yes, yeah. As with everything else, it is interesting to see how all the gears turn, and then that's where some of the earliest mentions of an improvement that might happen a year later start. And so it's just neat to see how the system works to satisfy these needs or create new investments in the community.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then the second thing that a Democratic board member was able to talk about was SB 233, known as the Georgia Promise Scholarship Act, but a lot of people know it as the school vouchers. So board member Hutchins brought that talking point up, and he had some questions about, because Cobb County Schools has 8 schools on the bottom 25% list from the state. And he wanted to ask the superintendent and his staff of how they were going to look at those 8 schools and what do they plan to do for those 8 schools.
Yeah. And I mean, a certain number of them are in board member Hutchins's post. And I know he obviously is justified at asking. So they've highlighted certain schools, certain opportunities. Can we have a conversation? And to your point, it at least was there on the agenda and got addressed. To me, I've thought about this, and I have I know that they do this at all levels with bill titles, but like Promise Scholarship Act sounds so much nicer and positive than the school voucher bill. And so I like making it less nebulous and explaining what's actually happening there. If people are interested in certain amounts per student or per staff member or whatever the bill or the improvement can be, and that's pointing to improvements that have been on a to-do list that are not getting addressed by using the existing system, then I think too that is a excellent opportunity to talk through why those improvements haven't been made, why things are going over here and not there. And if you don't like the bill and you think it's all political theater motivated or not the way you would do it, you have the floor. Explain why, explain what you would do differently, explain how things are prioritized, not just you as a superintendent or a board member, but as a large entity, one of the top rated large employers in the country, as was discussed and recognized, I think rightfully, at the board meeting a few days ago. And there are so many strengths if the reduction of secrecy and these vague frustrations with any sort of criticism or highlight is what undoes it to a degree for me. And I know that there are many in the community who feel that way too. And to that end, I ask them to attend meetings, message their board members, come out to public comment, and ask for explanations, ask for transparency, because we need more of it. But I'm going to stop rambling. Laura?
No, yeah. So the biggest thing is because it was on the agenda, both our strategy and accountability officer, as well as our chief academic officer, both Dr. Melanda and John Floresta, had talking points to answer Mr. Hutchins' question. But the biggest thing is that the superintendent called this a fake list. And I understand why he called it a fake list, because of the measurements and what the scholarship is meant for. It's not going to help the most vulnerable students. And that we also have a school of choice within Cobb. So if your school is not up to par, you can request your kids to go into other schools within Cobb if there is space. So,
and you provide
transportation.
Access and transportation.
So there are a lot of things that were touched on that I fully agree with the district about. But when you actually have a list coming from the state saying that 8 schools in Cobb County are at the bottom, to call it a fake list is kind of hurtful to those parents that know that their kids are in struggling schools. No matter how great Cobb County schools are, because they're getting this messaging from state-level politicians. So I understand where he's coming from by saying the metrics are off and all this other stuff, but we also have a lobbying arm with our district that could have been discussed when this bill was coming out. But we do have things in place. I feel like Dr. Melanda really went over ways to increase the education of those students, so that and information that they're getting. Because yes, we do have qualified teachers across the board. We have some of the best teachers here in Cobb County schools. Why are those schools considered failing? You would have to ask those state legislators that have addressed that as failing schools. But I feel that the district is trying to address things both federally and statewide so that those schools are not on the list. It's just some of the language that's being taken around why things are labeled failing, who vouchers seem to help, does not help the parents with kids that are in schools that are considered struggling.
Yeah. I really appreciate the way you walk through all of that, and it highlights again just that missing why. And if people are given an explanation, okay, you take issue with some of the terminology, the way things were measured, quantified, and how they ended up on list X. So what is it about that specifically that is an issue? And why are you going to do this? I was happy with some of what was explained, but I think there's this line between, it's just the issue with pride, period.
Mhm.
is if you are so proud of something that you won't dare lower yourself to criticism. Well, maybe the person with the criticism doesn't understand what's happening in the back room and the discussions that are being had elsewhere. So if you would explain that, people could all get on the same page. And I mean, I, in general, and everyone I've talked to over the last few years is interested in having conversations and working together and understanding where everyone's coming from and what we can actually do. For people who have a harder time getting to the table, I don't think you're lowering yourself to clarify what's going into certain decisions and why you're bothered by terminology. Just tell people why. And a lot of this would, I think, calm down over time and clear the path for actual progress.
I think from what I see, one of the hardest things is that, again, it goes into the partisanship of our board. Vouchers have been seen as segregationists and privatizing the school system. And when you have a large amount of your party pushing these vouchers for all sorts of reasons, as someone who works in the public school space, whether you're a board member or the superintendent, it becomes really, really hard to go against state level legislators that want this for one reason when you know that your job is in the public school sector. And when they look at Georgia as a whole, because again, Georgia has 159 counties, so they're not solely focusing on Cobb County. And one of our board members mentioned that, was like, oh, I don't think they were out to get Cobb. No one's solely focusing on Cobb, but we do have a large presence in the state. We do have a lobbying arm that goes to the state level meetings and committee hearings. And so we have a big piece of their ear to talk to them about, we cannot destroy public education. And so that's a big thing. It becomes a political talking point. And unfortunately, our kids become a political football about, well, we need to shut these schools down, or we need to take them out of public schools. We need to homeschool or go private. One thing that I really hold on to is that the superintendent said is that who these vouchers are made for, because they're looking at the bottom 25%, is not going to help those students. So those students that are in those failing schools, to take $6,500, which is what this voucher is for, one, you can barely find any schools for that amount of money. And then two, you have to provide the transportation. You're also looking at schools that may or may not have qualified or what's the word I'm looking for?
Accreditation.
Yeah, accredited teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And so it becomes really, really hard when you're looking at what who does this benefit, and so it's hard, because when people look at what we talk about on this show and what we have said in the past, they think that we're always critical of our superintendent. I think the superintendent was right in saying that, is that these vouchers are not there to help the most vulnerable students. But now my critical side of what the superintendent said was, this is a fake list. It kind of blows off of how people feel. And so it could be a yes and in that situation.
That is getting to the crux of many, many opportunities for improvement with regard to public education in Cobb County, where things don't have to be an or issue. They can be an and issue, to your point. And I and that was something my eyes are open to on when with both sides of that conversation about the vouchers or the scholarship programs or whatever verbiage people are using, is that you've got on one end the understanding of families at a certain level that are able to pay for private schools, and if they're able to afford those already, and they're getting credit removed from the tax base for the public school system in their county, well, now you've got kind of two hits. A supported student from a comfortable background is not in a public school, and they've taken their proportionate amount of tax base with them. And so the public education system suffers because of that. And it's not, to your point too, that amount in question normally isn't $25,000, which is some of the tuition at private schools in the country and in the county. And so it's
Absolutely.
it's so that's the one side. And I go, well, yeah, that all makes sense. And you're I don't know if you're doing your community any long-term favors to kind of cut off sources of support. In general, if everyone's having a better experience in the public education system, they're going to stay here, they're going to work here, they're going to raise their family here. Cobb gets stronger over time, period. And I think it is that simple. The other side that my eyes were very much open to, certainly during the campaign, was the fact that many, not only in Cobb but around the state, have felt ignored by their local government bodies, and they can't get enough attention, and then they feel it's too hard. And so because of that, they do want to operate in an independent manner. And there are times where, with the stories I heard, I was like, that is a fully justified concern, and I understand where you're coming from. And so it's a hard to say all or nothing is a very complicated discussion. And that's where I would want, just obviously explain the whys when you can, explain the issues you have with terminology, and we can at least figure out a way to maybe move forward or create some sort of amalgam of methods if something is really that needed. I'm biased. My personal preference is to have all the schools in the area be funded and supported well, so that you don't even have to go looking for another school.
Absolutely.
That's my preferred method.
Absolutely. And when when SB 233 went through our state capitol last year, that was a big thing, was that parents were very much like, when does my child get the education that they need? And I am very big on, you need to educate your child the best way possible. So if that's homeschool, private school, public school, charter school, I support you educating your child. What then becomes the issue is, okay, what is the government's role in supporting children? And we have not funded our schools properly. And so we have to kind of look at those both ways of, yes, I support you educating your child, whatever way you need, but I also would like our government to really focus on supporting our children in the public schools. Are they fed? Are they safe at home? Are they learning in the environment that they need to learn in? And so it's a very, very detailed conversation that we could probably spend the whole 45 minutes talking about vouchers. And it doesn't get solved in a single day. It's happening nationwide. People are fighting voucher bills left and right at different levels of government. And so as far as Cobb families go, it is here now. It is in effect, which they also talked at the board meeting. You can request that $6,500 to remove your child from public school. It is also being looked at whether it could be expanded at a state level. So all those things you kind of have to watch for, and what it does, and will it benefit you and your child. But I am a person who will always try to make our public schools the best that they can be.
Yeah, I agree. And then the one kind of overarching trend is just the resistance to any sort of criticism. If you end up, some of your schools or your county is on a list for anything, it says, this could be better, or you get negative press because of something that happened. Okay, well, what are we going to do about it? And putting your head in the sand or saying, that's nothing, dismissing it. Well, it seemed to matter to someone, and they don't seem like it's been resolved. So what are we going to do? And that brings me to something I wanted to talk about, which was all the public comments at the meeting, both in the afternoon and the evening sessions. There were certain trends. I always really appreciate people taking the time. It is not a small task to sit down and think about what you'd like to say in a 2-minute gap and make that like cohesive and clear and communicate and ask. And it's a lot to take the time to go there and then be on the record in front of your community. But I very much support, and I'm very grateful to everyone when they come out and speak. But I was going to let you take the first.
Tee it up. Yeah. So apparently, and so I missed the last school board meeting. I did watch it afterwards. I had other things going on, but there was, like Andrew said, a trending topic. Apparently the room was full from what I see from the media. And the two biggest things were families, Jewish families talking about antisemitism that they have seen in the district. And then Campbell families, so Campbell High School, 2 coaches were just fired. So the first thing that I heard, and I had heard from parents in my community that do still reach out to me about the anti-Semitism. We did have a swastika drawn on one of the walls in the middle school. And this is not the first time. It's been in our high schools here in the East Cobb area. And I have talked about this before, is that we've had a Holocaust survivor come talk to the school board members and invite them to the Holocaust Museum, where only 2 board members had shown up to attend. We also had, when they were originally going to address the swastikas on the wall in the high school, there was a board meeting scheduled for Yom Kippur. So they were not looking at the holidays of other religions. They were just looking at Christian holidays, and they had scheduled board meetings. So there is a trend. One of the public commenters said it was a systemic failure by the district of anti-Semitism in our schools.
Yeah. And this has been, I've been going to meetings for years. This has come up over and over. And I am just really sad that it is still such a recurring issue. I do not doubt the earnest nature of our board members and our superintendent when they say this is not okay. I don't accept this. Cobb doesn't stand for that. I agree with all that. Thank you. What are we doing? Because it keeps happening. And I spoke with parents last year who were frustrated because their students' big field trip was on a religious holiday, or it bled into a multi-day period that was going to overlap with a holiday. And so it's, well, then you can't go. And so that's really hard. And I know there's this, we had this discussion too at one of the debates during the campaign, but well, where's that line? Like, when are we going to stop listening to all these groups and accommodating their needs? It's like, okay, I understand. But if there are certain groups of certain sizes and we have dates absolutely locked in, I think we should at least try to have everything overlap and see what we can accommodate, and then justify something very well and clearly if we can't. That seems just like a very simple item on the to-do list. What is more complicated, and I think matters significantly, is addressing these issues that keep happening. I mean, these students and parents came and spoke not only a few days ago, but over the last few years, and they're talking about these uh, these instances of, I mean, bullying would be a vast understatement. I mean, I'm just shocked that, I mean, yes, kids could be mean, but I didn't know they had this in them, and what people are enduring is just absolutely wrong. And in anti-Semitism, there's also multiple methods of discrimination for multiple groups that I've heard about. And Cobb doesn't stand for bullying. Okay, what are we doing? It keeps happening. I know you can't watch everyone all the time. Well, then maybe they're trying to. But I would like to see community engagement and explanations and education. I mean, maybe like you were saying, outside of the classroom education for our leaders, our teachers, our staff, and then just absolute vigilance where people are holding their peers to account. And if someone is doing something like that, to me, the best way to be put in check, especially with the heavy amount of peer pressure that people are enduring in those years at school, is to be put in place by one of your peers. Yeah. and have that explained. Hey, that's not okay, and here's why. Like, there's more we could do.
I really think it again goes into the language of the way the leadership takes this. And I have mentioned it before. I actually personally just put out a video myself because I am in the East Cobb area. I am very involved with the Jewish community here. I have been to the synagogue a few times for Shabbat. I've grown up on Long Island, so I've grown up around Jewish families. So I've seen it. Historically, I know how the Black community and the Jewish community kind of go hand in hand with a lot of fights that they've had to against discrimination, against racism, and all those things. And so when you have our current board chair, when he was board chair last, compare the resolution that was made to a speed limit sign, and that you can't do anything about it, there are enforcements to be done. So, and that's been my problem, is there's no policy or procedure put in place for when these students or these families are experiencing anti-Semitism. As someone who's also watched board meetings and attended board meetings for years, I can tell you, I have heard the superintendent talk about his grandfather fighting in World War II, and I fully appreciate his grandfather's service. I know that is a big thing of fighting against anti-Semitism and how it's not allowed in our district. But these parents were asking for action items. What are we going to do moving forward? And so, unfortunately, and I know we'll touch on next on the Campbell High School coaches as well, is what I've seen is parents have to go the legal route. We've had with Cobb County Schools a couple of Office of Civil Rights cases for shared ancestry. I believe it was more so for Islamophobia and not anti-Semitism, but parents have to go the legal route to get anything done, and that's not what should be happening when you have numerous parents coming up. And touching on one other thing that they mentioned was certain curriculum that instructors are using. And I had spoken to these Jewish parents about, you need to have a board member that is willing to hold the superintendent accountable. And I don't know what their discussions with our new board member has been, but I have seen not only this new board member extend the superintendent's contract, but in the same meeting, and we'll also talk about this later, is to give the superintendent a raise. So are these parents concerned? Emphatically, yes. Give the superintendent a raise. So are these parents being heard? Is anything being done? Or are they having these backroom discussions kind of like you talked about?
Yeah. And no matter the group that's being impacted, the need is not being properly addressed over and over, whether it is, I mean, just in the past year, Islamophobia, antisemitism, students with special needs. I mean, we just had Exceptional Children's Week. They showed a really, really great video because we've got really fantastic programs. And I know, because some of them are my friends' parents who have taught in the district for a long time, like committed and passionate educators. And so I'm very, very grateful, not only for the programs, but also the highlights. Not everyone knows what is happening in our schools, and whether it's a banner item, like a really positive event for a group that has experienced various issues and bullying and are accidental, I say, with some quotes, forms of discrimination, and the conversations had, people understand where that group's coming from, and we can adjust to make it better in the future. I don't see any actual policies being rolled out. I see someone saying that's not okay, and I do think that's step one. But step two is, what are we going to do about it? And I don't want to see the answer be retribution, because people should not avoid discriminating against others because they're scared about getting in trouble. They should not discriminate because we're all in this together. And just because someone isn't like you does not mean that you're necessarily the person who's right, and that you have a right or an ability to attack them, either physically, verbally, behaviorally. And it's just, I would like to see more done and more conversations had there. That's the issue again with transparency and explaining why we've avoided certain formal anti-bullying programs and other opportunities for improvement because they're connected to or overlap with things that are a little left, a little liberal,
considered liberal, not nowhere.
That's thank you for that clarification. There shouldn't be anything about those certain features or traits that are extreme or left, like, oh, we want to treat and recognize everyone and not hurt them either actively or passively with our policies, with our operations. And then that wasn't okay. And I'm avoiding going down another rabbit hole with that whole explanation, because we do need to talk about the anti-bullying programs, but we have to listen to the people who are there with their needs standing in front of us, students and parents who are being moved to tears reflecting on the treatment that they've received in our schools. I mean, it's not okay to just say we're better than that and then not do anything.
And then to go into that with people standing in front of the board is, we also have families from Campbell High School because 2 coaches were fired without really any explanation. They had given years of service there. And again, these families they said, we're not asking you to reinstate them. We're just asking for some transparency of why these coaches were fired. Kind of out of left field.
Oh, I know. And so many people, I was grateful to see the turnout. And when you have person after person say, they're wonderful, why did you do this? You need to have a reason ready. And the superintendent very much right away after public comment in the evening session said, there's an active investigation. When I heard what had happened, I asked it to be looked into. So I do not doubt that they are trying to figure out what actually happened. What I am concerned about is that this will be designated a employee or personnel issue, and thus cannot be explained to the public. So I don't know what's going to actually come out and get sunlight on it. But when you have that many people turn out, you know that those educators and coaches are cared about. And this was, to have people mention Campbell and Wills High School was really something to hear, because my dad went to Wills High School, which is what it was before it became Campbell. My aunt went there as well. And we're from that Smyrna area. My grandfather's office was on Windy Hill. And so you've got this community that's like, hey, we've been here for decades, since the 70s. And I went there, my kid went there, my grandchild goes there now. And you just removed these two very important figures in our community. I mean, I think one of the coach's daughters spoke and said that their dad bled blue. He was so committed to the school. And so you're seeing people pour their heart out. They deserve an explanation.
Yeah. And I hope it doesn't get swept under the rug as a personnel issue where someone else will get fired for making this decision. And I hope the community can get the answers. But again, when you have that many years of service to not only just our schools, but to the district, there should be some sort of transparent explanation that is given. And so I hope that the parents of both issues, both the Campbell High School coaches as well as the Jewish families with the antisemitism, stay on the district, because it's important to get those answers. Because from historical advocacy on my part is, if you stop pushing to find out the answers, you will never get them.
Yeah. It should not be that hard. It should not take that much work. But if you do invest that, you make things better for your students or your family today and the people who are coming along 10 years from now as well. So it is valuable to put that time in and ask for reasonable things like explanations or new and improved policies and procedures. So I hope that continues to be done also. That somewhat connects to the next topic, which is if everything is going well, what do you do? And if things need improvement, what do you do with your district, with your employee? And as we've explained before, the superintendent is technically the hired employee of the Cobb County Board of Education. And so his contract right now, the structure of it is a 3-year block, and you can renew it. Doesn't necessarily have to be reviewed. And if I'm misspeaking, please stop me and correct me. But every year they opt to do that and always bump it forward. So there's always that 3-year block coming up. And on top of that, I was interested, I think is the polite word, as to what led to the proposal of and approval of a pay raise for the superintendent. Laura, do you have anything to add?
So yeah, as they were going through things after executive session, and of course this comes after public comment, so a lot of people were expressing their frustrations that they had with the district. There was a motion made to give the superintendent a raise. This part of this reasoning, at least during the meeting and in some of the news articles since, stated because last month when they extended his contract, it was unanimous. And I know Andrew and I talked about, the Democratic board members joined on to also extend the superintendent's contract. So he had 2 years.
To clarify too, the ones who were at that particular meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, board member Saylor was not present.
Was gone. So it was a 6-0 unanimous vote with board member Saylor absent.
And I got to jump in again.
Go ahead.
In prior meetings, board member Saylor had asked for a new date to be chosen so that she could be in attendance. She did not want to miss this meeting. I know that. And because of the biased political makeup of the board, that request was overruled with a party line vote to not accommodate her scheduling needs, which I think is absurd. If I were ever on a board or just a community board and someone asked with months of notice for a date accommodation, I would want to work that out, even if you were my most vicious enemy. you have a right to be present if you're providing that much notice. And then on the other end too, like emergencies come up, maybe you can't attend a meeting. That could be something too. But I just really wanted to clarify that it wasn't
No, that's
every
fine.
board member. Yeah.
Yeah, it was not every board member, but yeah. And so the raise was, there was a motion to put a raise on the table. And it went through on party lines, with 3 Democratic board members opposed and the 4 Republican ones agreeing. Again, it was emphatically seconded by
Lest
the
we
new
forget.
board member, which again, I go into, he has just become board member in January.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can see the superintendent's performance by February to extend his contract for another year. And now we're giving him a raise that you're voting for, and you have not seen his performance. I feel that, the extension of the contract can be pushed back to later in the year when you have a year's worth, or maybe even 6 or 7 months worth of history of working with the superintendent. But again, the new board member has been there now 3 months and has added not only another year to the superintendent's contract, but also has added a raise. And there are open records out to know exactly how much the superintendent is making, because again, there is some discrepancy. I believe the district has given the local paper a base salary value of $350,000. The state paper, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, has mentioned around $479,000 as his base salary. OpenSecrets.com has had his base salary at $517,000. And
So
was
it's just
watching
plus or minus 200 grand. It's not a big difference.
$100,000. And with watching the funds, we have combed through his contract, which was updated in 2021, where, yes, it includes education and car allowance and many other things. And he does receive a raise every time the teachers in the district get a raise as well. So what
This is
is the
above
base
and
salary?
beyond. Yeah.
Yeah. What is the salary that we are looking at? What is the raise value? And interestingly enough, right after that vote, one of the board members who did vote to extend his contract asked to rescind his vote from the dais as well. Did you want to talk about that, Andrew?
Well, yeah, I think whenever, whether it's in the same meeting or months or even years later, if someone is adjusting their vote or adjusting a statement they've made publicly in the past, I have changed my mind and here's why. I think that's significant, and I think there is likely a very powerful and valid explanation as to what led to something like that. I would also like party lines to not even play a role in so much of what our upper level leadership does and prioritizes. It's been interesting to see, because at the lower levels, I don't feel as much extremism, but then people are drawing really stark lines when the higher up you go, very much including the board seats and the superintendent's preferences, priorities, and so on. And so I suspect some discussions were had about next steps to take with the community, and there were disagreements. And then for all that to happen at the same time that we're giving a pay bump, and we just extended it the prior meeting. I mean, there's a lot going on. And
yeah, and our board lawyer, who acts as the parliamentarian, said per Robert's Rules of Order, board member Hutchins cannot rescind his vote. There are two different things that you can do. You can do a motion to rescind, which is what Board Member Hutchins did. You could also do a motion to reconsider, which might have been the proper channel that he would have went through, because that can happen later. You can make a motion to reconsider because it makes it a new vote and a new thing. So that's a big thing to know is Robert's Rules of Order when you're on board levels like this. And interestingly enough, if you are involved like in the PTA or any other boards, they all follow Robert's Rules of Order. And so knowing that is extremely important when you're sitting on a board where you may or may not want to change your mind about what you've done, or if someone has not held up their end of a bargain and now is using what you've previously done to get a pay raise.
Yeah, I do think it is interesting, and the Robert's Rules thing was the explanation was interesting too for me to remember and for everyone, like you said, because it's used elsewhere. But the explanation, I believe, was the fact that that meeting where that vote occurred had already been adjourned. So there's no going back to a certain degree unless you call for a new vote to undo it, or the equivalent of like passing a bill to undo a bill in different legal bodies. And then on top of that, once there's an associated either policy or contract signed and committed, then you're really locked in. And so for whatever it's for, and you'd have to propose a new contract, propose a new vote. It's much more involved at that point.
And even still, like, even if a motion to reconsider was moved and seconded, it still takes a majority to have that reconsideration. And with the majority, with the extreme sides of the aisle, that motion probably wouldn't have passed either, even if that could have went through, because the majority probably would have shot it down. And it would just take a couple of extra steps rather than the board lawyer saying, no, that meeting's gone, so we can't do a motion to rescind your vote. So that was interesting. But moving on, again, the superintendent had some comments at the end, and interestingly enough, Andrew and I have talked about this group. The Servius Group was bought into, as the superintendent said, to be left of launch, a term used when you're firing
A Marine.
missiles in the military. But the Servius Group, when they introduced themselves to the district, they were very secretive about who they were, exactly what they were doing, and they were there to kind of monitor our students for threats of violence, and making sure that it didn't happen, kind of following some telltale signs, i.e. profiling students who might be threats to their schools or schools' communities. But the superintendent says now they have a new job. Do you want to go into that new job, Andrew?
Yes. And before I even do, as with everything that we do with a public body, certainly for public schools and 100,000 students in our community, I think it really matters to have whatever's being implemented justified and backed by a lot of data or track record, or recommendations from other school systems in the country. Anything would be something. And multiple times over the last few years, certainly since 2020, we've implemented or hired things that lack any sort of background or justification for investment or efficacy, if it's a medical treatment device of sorts, We could talk about that another episode. But this group that was hired, if you wanted to find some sort of recommendation or rating online with its current form, it would be hard to do so. In the past, they've been in different structures, and they've provided, I think, private security for families who are traveling abroad, which all of those phrases mean they're probably doing pretty well, those families that are able to hire private security. This spun off and became a new structure of support, and we brought them in at the, was it October last year? They introduced them.
I feel like, yes, October.
And to provide fixes, whether that's surveillance, which is a loose term, or improvements to our schools. Now, they're also going to be providing information to the community and holding town halls, which is something that I've asked for our board members and superintendents to do for years.
Numerous families have asked for a town hall.
Yeah, that's true. And so now the security group is going to be holding town halls to educate the public on human trafficking and the concerns and the prevalence of that in our community and what to watch out for in our schools, which I'm not against. I'm really curious about what's leading, like, why are they the experts and what is their background in this? And I mean, obviously, if there are things we could do to be more vigilant and help reduce that, okay, yes, but what is going on here, and why is it this particular group? I have questions.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions. Sex trafficking and child trafficking is a huge problem here in Cobb County. Superintendent mentioned that. That is something I agree with him about. That whole yes and. When Servius Group was introduced to us, without them telling us who they truly were and all this other stuff, is their background was in CIA, special forces, maybe some mental health stuff as well, and how they were going to surveil helping the district. There were questions about that when they came forward with, or as they put it, coming out of the shadows to tell us who they were. So now that they're going to focus on trafficking and hold these town halls, I agree with you. What is their background? Who makes them the authority? What things are being put in place? There's a lot of organizations already here in Cobb that are working on that. Has the district reached out to them? Mm-hmm. Also, when we started this series, one of the books that the superintendent removed was about sex trafficking. So while it does happen in our community, kids can't, or not kids, let me rephrase that because it was a high school level book. So our high schoolers cannot read about it, but we can attend town halls talking about sex trafficking. I guess with parents there, but then that can go into, you can have a parent permission to read a book. Again, going back to them holding these town halls, I think it's a great idea, but there's a lot of questions about what is their background, what is their training on understanding what trafficking looks like, especially trafficking here in Cobb County. Do they even have ties to Cobb County, knowing where certain areas are? You know, I know living here in East Cobb, I am part of the triangle, which is the drug triangle. A lot of people, a lot of drugs get trafficked through here. And people don't like to talk about that. Knowing those things, knowing what other communities we are attached to in that triangle, where people go missing and families talk about not seeing certain family members because they have gotten addicted to drugs. So when we talk about sex trafficking and child trafficking, what is their history with that and who are they bringing in? But knowing the district is one of those things that kind of have to wait and see for when they have the actual town hall to get any of those questions answered.
Yeah. There's an interconnection here that I certainly think should be, and I hope will be explored with the schools and the groups who are already active in this area, trying to obviously highlight the need and provide services for those who are identified and working to exit, escape, return to obviously their home or their family or whatever's going on. And I know being so adjacent to such a busy airport plays a role. I mean, we've covered that information in various capacities and in meetings even. And so this topic has come up, but the lack of experience, any sort of like cited credentials, it seems like a pretty significant topic to be putting all of this investment and formality into. I mean, town hall, we're finally having one. Great. It's coming from a vaguely described hired company with no public accreditation. And maybe any info is good info and it'll be helpful. I don't doubt that people are well-meaning, but is that being superseded by the desire to control the narrative? And I think that comes up over and over is a touchy topic. We are going to meet. We'll convene another day and tell you what we're doing about it. We're not going to do that anti-bullying program over there. We're going to make our own. We're not going to do that counselor recognition program. That is a national operation because we had some issues with some of our counselors, and we're going to do our own recognition program because it's our call. You're going to do what we say. You're going to prioritize what we tell you to. You're going to handle topics the way we tell you to. Yes. Okay. At a certain point, this can't all be top-down directed. And I know there are hundreds of thousands of people in our community that want to be a part of this support system and make everything better. So let's have town halls and build stuff. I know it can't happen overnight, but we can. There is certainly more that can be done.
And adding on to that is even if they were to take on the narrative, which we have seen done numerous times, does it make sense to pay a company like Servius Group to host these town halls? Because it is not free to contract them out. We are paying them a fee. What we have not seen. That is another Open Records Act, which if you ever file open records through the district, sometimes they are a lot of money, and it's so that you don't get the information that you are looking for. But
It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. But now on to the fun stuff. I always like to end with good stuff. We are not just focusing on one student this week again. We are focusing on large groups of people. One of my favorite was Exceptional Children's Week. One of my daughter, at least in my local school, one of my daughter's friends, her mother hosts that, so she does an amazing job. So if you have exceptional children, bless you. We fully appreciate all the work you do, not only for your child, but for all the children in the school, to recognize them and to lift them up. So that is one of my favorites. Go ahead, Andrew. You can mention the other weeks that we mentioned.
Yes, yeah. And these were covered at the meeting too. I was happy they were. Maintenance Worker Appreciation Day, which I know is key. These buildings don't preserve themselves. And there are so many studies about the value that having a well-maintained and structured facility bring to not only employee satisfaction and performance, but students very much as well. And so having everything be functional, arranged, clean, orderly really, I mean, it is a tide that lifts all boats, and our community benefits because of that. And I watched over and over when my mom was a teacher, how what's the right phrase? They're like the cavalry. They come in and you need something and they can make it better, and then your event or whatever improvement they've made is saved. And so I really was happy that was covered, because they are very, very important to the operation of our district. And then we talked about them earlier, but Social Worker Appreciation Week as well, being that bridge between specialists and the medical and mental health communities and legal entities and the schools. I mean, that is an important node that is very complicated, and to have people who can navigate that and provide services for anyone who needs it that's also attending our school, I mean, that is it's just invaluable. And the more of those and the more counselors we can have to get up to recommended ratios, the better. And so I would love to see that happen. I was very happy to see the recognition this time around. And then School Board Appreciation Week, which I didn't think they took enough time to pat themselves on the back, because I know that they do a lot. And I'm talking about every board member and the superintendent. It is no small task to run an operation this large. And I value the work and the time that everyone puts in, and was happy that all these groups had their own week so that there's some time taken to really tip the hat and thank them.
Yeah. All those people are so, so important to make our schools run. And it's why I believe Cobb County has some of the best schools out there. Also, another big thing, report cards went out. So if your student is doing well, doing the best they can, has increased in an area that they were struggling in, make sure to celebrate them at home. They appreciate everything. I know that both my kids, the smallest change in their report card, they're like, "Mommy, did you see this?" So it's very, very important for them. So please make sure to celebrate those accomplishments. And yeah. And again, if you want to let us know about something that your student is doing and get them recognized on the show, please reach out. We have an email, notboardoфeducation@gmail.com. That's NOTBOREDOF, and then education, EDUCATION.
It's that simple.
At Gmail. It's super simple.
I still like the name.
Easy as possible.
But yeah, please reach out, and then we're happy to provide any information about what it means to attend a meeting, sign up for public comment, how that whole process works. I think that too could be made a lot clearer and more accessible, but that's why Laura and I are doing what we're doing, because we want it to be more accessible, and the more people who are involved and voicing their needs and concerns, the better, because every student deserves a voice.
And every voice deserves to be heard.
So thank you all.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you next time.
Have a good one.
Cobb County celebration, helping kids, no hesitation, not Board of Education.